The Battle of Waterloo, 1815, Napoleon's dramatic fall. It was a single day, a single battlefield, yet it decided the fate of Europe. The year is 1815. On the rolling hills of Belgium, thunder roars, not from the skies but from cannons. Two great armies stare each other down. At their center stands a man whose name had shaken kings and crowned emperors, Napoleon Bonaparte. But on this day, his legend would crumble. This is the story of Waterloo, the final gamble, the last charge, and the dramatic fall of an empire. The return of the emperor. Just months earlier, Napoleon had been exiled to the island of Elba. Europe believed the Corsican ogre was defeated. But in March 1815, he escaped. With only a small band of loyal soldiers, he marched into France. And something extraordinary happened. The French people rallied to him. Old soldiers returned, villagers cheered, even troops sent to stop him joined his side. In a matter of weeks, Napoleon was back in Paris. Emperor once more. Europe trembled. The coalition forms. The kings and emperors of Europe would not allow Napoleon to rise again. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia formed the Seventh Coalition, but Napoleon acted fast. Before the Allies could unite, he struck north into Belgium, hoping to smash his enemies one by one. His plan: defeat the British, led by the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussians, led by Marshal Blucher, before they could join forces. The battlefield of Waterloo, on June 18, 1815, the stage was set near the village of Waterloo. Wellington's army of British, Dutch, and Belgian troops held a ridge, waiting. Napoleon's forces, veterans of Austerlitz and Jena, hardened by years of war, prepared for one last glorious battle. The ground was wet. Rain had turned the fields into mud. It would slow his artillery, but Napoleon was confident. The battle begins. At 11:30 a.m., French cannons thundered. The ground shook as shells tore into Wellington's lines. Columns of French infantry advanced, drums beating, bayonets gleaming. They struck the farmhouse of Hougoumont, a key stronghold. The British guards held firm. For hours, the farm became a slaughterhouse of fire and smoke. Napoleon pressed again and again, but Hougoumont would not fall. The cavalry charges. By mid-afternoon, Napoleon unleashed his cavalry. Thousands of horsemen in shining breastplates charged uphill, their sabers flashing. They crashed into Wellington's lines. But the British squares stood unbroken, walls of bayonets defying wave after wave of cavalry. The French attacks grew desperate. The battlefield was soaked in blood. The Prussians arrived. Then came the moment Napoleon had feared. On his right flank, the dark columns of the Prussian army appeared. Marshal Blucher had arrived. Exhausted from marching all day, the Prussians still threw themselves into battle. Now Napoleon faced not one enemy, but two. His dream of dividing and conquering had collapsed. The Imperial Guard, the last gamble, but Napoleon would not yield. At around 7 p.m., he played his final card. The Imperial Guard. These were the elite, the men who had never broken in battle. "Vive l'Empereur!" they cried as they marched up the ridge toward Wellington's army. For a moment, the fate of Europe hung in the balance, but as musket fire ripped through their ranks, the Guard faltered, then broke. Someone shouted the unthinkable. "La Garde recule! The Guard retreats!" Panic spread. The French army collapsed. The fall of the legend. By nightfall, the field of Waterloo was covered in thousands of dead and dying. Napoleon fled the battlefield, his dreams shattered. Within weeks, he abdicated once more. This time, there would be no escape. He was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic, where he would spend the last years of his life, not as a conqueror, but as a prisoner. The question is, and so ended the age of Napoleon, with one final gamble on a muddy field in Belgium. But here is the question: was Waterloo the inevitable end of a man who reached too high? Or was it the world conspiring to bring down a genius who had changed history forever? Watch next.